Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. My colleague Kevin Stewart has spoken of his time in Aberdeen City Council, where he was the convener of the Finance and Resources Committee, and the important role that trade unionists played in relation to a number of the budget discussions that took place, and also in resolving the vexed issue of single status and equal pay and modernisation, something which regrettably remains unresolved in a number of local authority areas. And I wonder what the impact would be on ability of unions to effect resolution to that issue were the trade union bill to be passed at Westminster. During my time at Aberdeen City Council, I convened the Appeals Committee, and I saw firsthand the benefits of trade union facility time in being able to provide appropriate support and representation for staff members who were lodging appeals against disciplinary procedure. And I have serious concerns that if this bill is passed, that ability of trade union officials to work on behalf of their membership in relation to appeals against disciplinary procedure or in matters of grievance will be severely restricted and potentially remove some recourse to justice for those members. I also spent time on the Corporate Health and Safety Committee at the Council, which was an important forum which brought together council officers, union representatives and elected members in order to drive forward the health and safety agenda, which my colleague Claire Adamson spoke of in its wider context. But at a local authority level, again, I have concerns that those union voices could be lost to that process were the changes around facility time to be introduced. Recently at Aberdeen City Council, my colleague Councillor Jackie Dunbar, who leads the SNP group on the Council, tabled a motion worded similarly to motions passed at other local authorities across Scotland, seeking to express the Council's explicit opposition to the trade union bill, and also seeking to put the Council in a position where it would not take action in order to undermine union rights as a consequence of some of the measures of the bill. This motion, regrettably, was ruled as incompetent by the Labour Party Lord Provost, despite it being along the same lines as those passed in other councils, and an attempt to lodge a motion with different wording in a bid to get consensus was not included on the agenda of the Council's Urgent Business Committee. My hope is that this was not a narrow consideration, that a motion put forward by the SNP was the issue, and I hope that a resolution can be found so that Aberdeen can join those other councils which have, I believe, quite rightly expressed their outright opposition to the trade union bill. And I regret, Presiding Officer, that it was interesting when Margaret McDougall was speaking that she spoke about regressive union legislation passed by the Conservatives in the 1970s that remains on the statute books to this day. And I regret the fact that we retain regressive Conservative union legislation on the statute books in spite of 18 years of unbroken Labour government from 1997 to 2015. And that raises a secondary concern for me, Presiding Officer, which is that suggests to me that we have no explicit guarantee that were this legislation to pass, which I hope it will not, but we have to work within the reality that there is a majority Tory government at Westminster, were this legislation to pass and were there to be a change of government, we have no explicit guarantee that this legislation would be reversed, given what we saw following 1997. I'll take a brief intervention from the
Neil Findlay.
The member really needs to keep up with news. Jeremy Corbyn's absolutely committed to reversing this legislation.
Mark McDonald.
Well, we shall see, Mr Findlay, firstly, whether Mr Corbyn is Prime Minister after 2020, and secondly, whether he keeps to his word in that respect. But Mr Findlay and his colleagues have spoken in relation to the legislative consent motion, and we will accept the Labour amendment at decision time. But the point is this, is that until the UK Government changes its position around the requirement for legislative consent, the passing of a legislative consent motion will have no meaningful effect because the legislation can still pass at Westminster, and the parliamentary supremacy that Westminster commands means that challenge to legislation passed by Westminster is almost entirely likely to fail. And no amount of hand-wringing can deflect from the fact that the Labour Party stood in the Smith Commission and following the Smith Commission during the debate on the Scotland Bill to leave employment law and trade union law in the hands of the Conservative Party at Westminster by rejecting the proposal that was put forward by my colleagues at Westminster to devolve employment rights as part of that process. Now, I hear the argument that union movement solidarity transcends national borders, although, as my colleague Claire Adamson pointed out, this will not affect unions in Northern Ireland because the decision has already been taken to devolve matters to them. But the very simple fact, Presiding Officer, is that what is very clearly demonstrated in this trade union bill is that this is not an example of better together, it is an example of suffer together.